Hello everyone. Welcome to Consumer Action, ID Theft and Debt Collection webinar. Thank you for joining us. We will have our Community Outreach and Training Manager, Linda William, presenting today. Let me turn this over to Linda now.
Thank you, Nani. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Consumer Actions ID Theft and Debt Collection webinar. And thank you so much for joining us. My name is Linda Williams. I'm a Community Outreach and Training Manager with Consumer Action. We are on Twitter now. I want to give a shout out to my coworker, Allegra Howard, who's on Twitter getting ready for the tweet storm of the century. She will be tweet chatting during the webinar. You still have time to join her. Again, our handle is at the bottom of the screen at Consumer Action, hashtag CAID Theft and CA webinars. Before we get started, I need to go over a few housekeeping tips for you. Everyone should be on mute. But if you're calling in, please put your phone on mute. We'll be taking questions on Twitter after the webinar. As a matter of fact, we will be on Twitter for 30 minutes following the webinar to take your questions. If you don't have a Twitter account, you can use the Zoom chat function for questions as well. Fact sheets and articles regarding some of the subjects that's going to be discussed today will be placed in your Dropbox. You will be able to retrieve those following the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, so if you missed something, you should be able to go back and listen to it. It will be posted on our website probably in about 3 days. We have a great program in store for you today. So let me just go over the agenda quickly. If you're not familiar with Consumer Action, I would like to introduce you to our agency. Following the introduction, I'm going to open up with identity theft. Why identity theft? Because if you are a victim of identity theft, you have a 99.5% chance that a debt collector is going to come knocking at your door. I'm going to open up with trends in identity theft and give you some stats so you can get a clear picture of this particular threat. Following that discussion, we're going to go into the different forms of ID theft and the impact that they can have on you. The next segment is going to be on debt collection. I'm going to open up with a segment on the trends in debt collection, what's on the horizon for debt collection in 2020. Followed by what to do when a debt collector calls. A debt collector is calling you on the phone. What should you do? What are your rights? From there, we're going to move and look at a couple of the debt collection scams. And we're going to end the segment with how to complain, the complaint process. When a debt collector has violated the federal law, what should you do? And talking about debt collection, my focus would be on the federal law. The state law on debt collection varies from state to state. So my primary focus would be on the federal law. And again, we will end the segment with the complaint process, what to do when you feel like a debt collector has violated the federal law. And speaking of how to complain, please go to our website and download one of our most popular popular brochures. It's called How to Complain. I was an advocate with the Legal Aid Foundation for 20 years in Los Angeles. And one of the things that I know that some of our clients do not know how to complain to get results. This brochure is going to give them a step-by-step guide on how to complain. Go to the website, download it, read it. If you agree with me that it's totally awesome, contact Consumer Action and see how you can get a couple 100 copies for your clients. So what do we do? Consumer Action is a national nonprofit advocacy and educational organization that has served consumers all over the United States since 1971. For me, one of the most memorable events in our colorful history is when we launched our grassroots protest over supermarkets selling consumers dented food cans, dented food canned goods. As you know, dented canned goods are the biggest culprit of botulism. And they were not giving them away, they were selling them to consumers. In addition to our rich and colorful history, we enjoy a national reputation for creating multilingual consumer educational materials in the field of credit, banking, privacy, insurance, utilities, all of those kitchen table, pocketbook, budgeting issues that not only impact you, your family, but the client communities that you serve. For an example, our Managing Money Project website is a financial empowerment clearinghouse that features some of our most popular modules, such as Money Management 1, 2, 3, that follows the 3 stages of an individual's financial life cycle. In fact, we will be in Arizona in June presenting on that module, our ID theft and debt collection module, and our health insurance module. When the housing market declined in 2006, we were on it. We launched a housing information project to help consumers learn how to keep their homes, how to protect their investment and avoid foreclosure. We are a 501c3 organization. We are supported by membership, donations, and grants. And for the low cost of $25, you can become a member of Consumer Action. And what would you get for that membership? You will get a subscription to our Consumer Action News, which help keeps you updated on all of the emerging consumer issues. At the end of the webinar, there will be information about how you can become a member. Now, before I dive into the module, before we get started, I have a question for you. When you hear the words identity theft, what is the first thing to come to your mind? You don't have to write this down. You don't have to put it on Zoom chat. I just want you to think about it in your head. When you hear the words identity theft, what is the first thing to come to your mind? Identity theft continues to pose a threat and a challenge for consumers. My mom used to say, baby, where there's a will, there's a way. And from looking at the stats from 2018, it appears that identity thieves share this philosophy. They are using the technology to commit fraud and just take us to the cleaners. Now, I don't have anything against technology. Technology is great. From my little perch here in Fontana, California, I can watch my granddaughter in real time at her first dance recital. I can see the kids, pictures of my grandkids opening up Christmas gifts on Christmas and see the smile on their faces. But the thing of it is, the thieves are using the technology to target us. And then unless we protect ourselves, they are going to continue to take us to the cleanest. For an example, the Consumer Sentinel Network, which is maintained by the FTC, that tracks consumer fraud and ID theft complaints that have been filed with federal, state, and local enforcement agencies across the United States. Of the 3 million identity theft and fraud reports that they received in 2018, 1.4 million were fraud related. 1.4 million. And 25% of those cases reported money was lost to the tune of $1.48 billion. So 25% of the cases reported in 2018 lost money to the tune of $1.48 billion. Every year, Javelin and Strategy provides a comprehensive analysis of fraud trends. And they have a new one come that should be out around May this year. But if you look at the overall facts and statistics, it was 2018 was a bit of a mixed bag for consumers. As you can see from the snapshot. First, the good news. The overall fraud rate dropped from 15%. The number of consumers who were victims of identity fraud fell from 14.4 million in 2018 down from a record high of 16.8 in 2007. But the trend is going in the right direction, but don't pop the corks on the champagne just yet. While the fraud rate dropped, the cost of identity fraud for victims in 2018 was much higher. Victims were paying more out of their pocket for fraud. 23% of fraud victims had unreimbursed personal expenses in 2018. That was nearly 3 times as many as they did in 2016. So what accounted for this drop, for this overall drop in fraud? Well, the main reason was that in the United States, we transitioned to the chip card. And when we transitioned to the chip card, that caused fraudsters to shift their focus to other forms of fraud, specifically account takeover and new account fraud. So what is new account fraud? New account fraud or otherwise application fraud occurs when the thief uses your social security number and other personal identifying information to open up new accounts in your name. In 2018, new account fraud accounted for $3.4 billion in losses, which was up from $3 billion in 2017. And what are the common targets? Mortgages in your name, student loans in your name, car loans, BMWs, Mercedes in your name, and credit cards. In 2018, more than 167,000 people reported that a fraudulent credit card account was opened up in their name using their personal information. Account takeover was another focus of thieves in 2018. Existing account fraud or account takeover occurs when the thieves acquires your credit or your debit card information, and they use that information to purchase products or services. They could have the actual card, or they can have the account number and the expiration date and that little 3-digit number on the back of your card. And the other thing about this type of fraud, it's not only looking at your credit and getting your credit and your debit, it's moving to other areas like merchant debit cards, the prepaid cards, and your reward programs. They're taking the rewards from your airline rewards, from your hotel rewards, and they're also moving over to mobile phone accounts. They are targeting businesses which generally do not have the level of security that a bank may have, because it's easy for them to take it over. As you can see on the screen, account takeovers increased from 380,000 in 2016 to a whopping 679,000 in 2018. And that's a lot. I have a question for you. This is a true or false question. In 2011, the Social Security Administration changed the way that they were selecting and issuing numbers. Is that true or is that false? In 2011, the Social Security Administration changed the way Social Security numbers are issued. Is that true or is that false? Well, let's take a look at synthetic identity theft. Synthetic identity theft is another serious threat to consumers. As the name suggests, it involves creating what I call an avatar, or creating or fabricating or piecing together or an identity. And there's a few ways that this can happen. The most common way that they create a synthetic identity is to utilize unused social security number, generally a child's social security number. Why? Because it's a virgin number. It's a virgin number. No one is, when most parents are not checking to see if they have a credit report, so they definitely not checking to see if their child have a credit report. So the child's social security number is generally combined with other information like a made up name, a made up date of birth, and a made up address that's controlled by the thief. So how is this happening? In 2011, the Social Security Administration switched to a completely random process for creating and assigning Social Security number. The reason being is that what they were trying to do was prevent identity theft, and they thought if they use a random process, it would be difficult for thieves to look at other public information and guess what a person's Social Security number is. The problem is they actually created a group of innocent victims, our kids, our grandkids, your nieces, and your nephews. How is this fraud working? Well, when a thief creates a fake what synthetic identity stolen, with stolen information and with stolen social security numbers and the information that they made up. What they do is then they start to apply for credit. Now, initially, the credit is going to be rejected because after all, this is a synthetic person. A synthetic person has no identity. That child's social security number is still so fresh and new. There is no credit for this particular person. So, but what happened is the fact that the credit reporting agency took the steps to look for this credit file actually creates a credit file. And, and once that file is created, the thief or his accomplice as a synthetic identity as an authorized user on several legitimate accounts. And within a few months, there's actually credit history for this particular person. This fictitious identity may have occupation, and it also may have income. Another dangerous trend that's out there is called cell phone fraud. And this is another fast growing threat that you need to worry about. According to Consumer Reports, this type of fraud happens when crooks open up phony cell phone account in your name and use it to access your bank accounts, sign up for credit. They may just sell your phone number to other criminals. And the big deal with this type of fraud is, unlike other types of fraud, cell phone fraud has few consumer protections. And it's also harder to detect, and it can go on for months. For an example, the limited liability that's afforded to you with your debit card or your credit card is not well defined for cell phone companies. With your credit card, you may have limited liability, maybe up to $50. This is not well defined with the cell phone companies. I read an article where many individuals that have been victims of this, they are left trying to explain to the phone companies what the fraud is. The law hasn't just caught up with this crime yet. In 2018, according to Consumer Reports, the number of victims that were caught up in the cell phone fraud surged 78% to 680,000 consumers. And 22% of those found out about the fraud when a debt collector knocked at their door. So how is this fraud? How does the fraud work? Your information is widely available to criminals online through data breaches, from what you post on social media. So it's not hard for them to get pieces of your information, especially if your information was breached by a thief. They will have your social security number, your driver's license number, your phone number, your address, and other personal information. So they take this type of information, and what they do, they open up a fake account in your name. All types of fake accounts, including fake cell phone accounts. And unlike bank or credit card, cell phone companies, cell phone accounts are easily to open because a lot of the carriers don't always go through an extensive background check. So once the criminals have created this fake cell phone account, what they do is they will port your number to the fake account. Porting a number allows the criminals to use your phone to access your bank account or your retirement accounts. How? Have you ever went online and you made a change to your bank account and you was trying to get on and you got this message saying, we need to authenticate you. Would you like for me to send a message to your email account or to your phone account? And so the thief would pick phone account. And so once the bank sends that authentication number to them, then voila, they're in your bank account. So what can you do if you think that you are a victim? You have to do what I call the steps. You must check your credit report. If you think you're a victim, put a fraud alert on your credit file. That fraud alert will be there. You can take it off anytime you want, but it will be there for a year. Pull your credit report, check your credit reports, find out if there's any accounts that you don't recognize on there. Use the credit freeze if you have to. So you must do the steps. Now, While you're sitting at your desk looking at your computer or listening to me over the phone, I want you to conjure up an image in your head. It's probably not hard to do because you probably have a client that fit this profile. Conjure up in your head a family of four, a mom, a dad, two kids. Parents are working two jobs to stay afloat, but last week dad was laid off his job. The refrigerator is on the blink. It's not keeping the food cold. And one thing this family can't afford to do is waste any food. There's just not enough time in the day for mom to be running back and forth to the laundromat. But this family several weeks ago just filed their tax return, and with income earned credit, they are expecting a whopping big check in the mail. It would be enough to pay off a couple of bills, replace the refrigerator, get the washer and dryer, and put some money up for rent until dad is called back to work. So they're sitting, waiting for this money. They're counting on this money. But instead of getting the check in the mail, they received a letter from the IRS saying, sorry, but you've already filed your taxes and we already issued the check. Tax ID theft. Tax ID theft occurs when someone uses your personal information to file a fraudulent tax return or claim your tax benefit. And this fraud is particularly harmful because the legitimate taxpayer have no way of knowing that this fraud has been committed. Like that family of four, they're sitting around waiting for this tax return because they need this money and they have no idea that the fraud has been committed. If someone uses your social security number to file a tax return before you do, here's what's going to happen. When you file your tax return, IRS records is going to show that someone else has already filed and got the money. And you know IRS, they don't like to give out more money. So if you file by mail, the IRS will send you a notice in the mail stated that a return has already been filed. If you try to e-file and the return has already been filed, the IRS will turn around and reject it. So what should you do? If the IRS sends a notice saying that someone used your social security number to get a tax return, or there is another problem like one of the children that you list as dependent, social security number has already been used for another tax return, you want to respond as quickly as possible, especially if those clients need that money. You want to call the IRS using a telephone number in the letter. You will need, when you call the IRS, you will need the letter in front of you and a copy of your prior year's tax returns because they will need to verify your identity and they're going to want to know your adjusted gross income from the prior year. That's how they're going to identify you. And another thing you need to do is visit the ID theft, visit idtheft.gov to complete the IRS ID affidavit and submit it to the IRS online so they can begin resolving your problem as soon as possible. Next, it is really, really important to limit the potential damage to the ID theft. So do the steps. Put a fraud alert on your credit file. You can place that fraud alert for a year. Once that's done, contact the free credit reporting agency to request a free copy of your credit report. Monitor that report. If any new accounts are open in your name, move quickly to close those accounts. And remember, the Fair Credit Reporting Act is another powerful tool that you have. It is intended to protect consumers from misinformation being placed on a file, and consider putting a credit freeze on your credit report. But again, if you think that you may be a victim of tax identity theft, file your taxes as early as possible. Remember, these thieves are sitting around with this information that they've collected, waiting for the tax season to start so they can start filing all of these claims. Review your credit report for any suspicious activity. Protect your personal information. Be really, really stingy with that social security number. If you go to the dentist and he wants your social security number, ask him if you can give him the last four numbers. If you got a medical card, he shouldn't need your social security number. And another thing that consumers are not doing, check your annual social security earnings statements every year to verify that the information is correct and that no one is using your social security number for a job and this income is being placed on your account. Change your online passwords often, if you can't remember these passwords, use a password manager to help you. Another form of identity theft that's causing harm to victims is medical identity theft. Medical identity theft occurs when someone uses your personal information like your Medicare card, your Kaiser card, or your medical insurance number to get treatment, prescriptions, medical devices, or submit claims in your name. It is a growing menace. The FTC reported a 103% jump in cases of medical identity theft in 2018. Yet, according to the World Forum, despite its profound risk that it brings, it is the least studied and the most poorly documented form of identity theft crimes. It is one of the most insidious crimes for a number of reasons. Number one, it can cost you more than just purely financial identity theft. It can cost you more. Why? Because anytime someone uses your medical information to get service, they introduce mistakes into your medical file. They may be you may be allergic to penicillin. They may not. They may have O negative blood. You may have B positive blood. All of those mistakes is being entered into your file that can cause you harm later on. The second reason why it can cause harm, if the federal law generally limits a consumer's liability for fraudulent use of your credit card to $50, but you don't have those type of protections for stolen medical identity. In 2017, the World Forum did a report, and among the victims of medical identity theft, the average cost to clear it up cost the victims $13,500. That includes medical and legal costs. And according to the report issued by the forum, many victims suffered long-term problems with aggressive medical debt collectors haunting them, severe impaired credit, and some even face criminal prosecution. Why? Because the victims were stealing this information and they would stockpiling narcotics like Vicodin. And when the records was traced back, it was traced back to the medical victim. So what can you do if you think you could be a victim of identity theft? Like I said, you can't stop identity theft, but you can reduce your risk. And here's a few tips that you can use to reduce your risk. Review the explanation of benefit statement or the EOB or the Medicare summary that you get every time you go to the doctor. If I go to Kaiser, before I leave Kaiser, they will put these documents in my hand. When I would take my mom to the doctor, she had Medicare, these documents would come in the mail. Check with your doctors to ensure your medical records are accurate. You know, HIPAA gives you a right to look at your medical records once a year. Use that right. Look at your medical records to make sure that everything is correct. Don't share your medical information with anyone. And the most important thing you need to do is go to your medical provider's website and look to see how they are taking care of your personal information. How are they safeguarding? How are they keeping it safe? That's one of the things that you need to know. Don't be afraid to ask questions of your provider. And again, if you think you're a victim, do the steps, do the fraud alert, monitor your credit report. But here's one other thing you need to know. Medical identity theft is not always a financial crime. How you find out you may be a victim of medical identity theft is you may have to go to get a specialty report like MIB to check to see what information that they have on you. Generally, when you go to the specialty consumer reports, that's when you will find out whether or not your file has been crossed with someone else. And consider putting a freeze on your credit file to protect your information. Another form of identity theft that's really, really harmful is criminal identity theft. Most individuals find out they are a victim of criminal identity theft when they're trying to get a job and the employer is doing a background check and they find out that they got warrant for the arrest for drinking and driving, other offenses that would keep them from getting that particular job. Or they get pulled over by an officer and they thinking they're just going to get a ticket and the officer is saying, get out the car, you're under arrest. So what can you do? You're going to say, oh, I must be a victim of identity theft? And the officer's going to say, no, get in the back of the car. So criminal identity theft occurs when an imposter provides the law enforcement another person's name and personal information, such as their driver's license number, their date of birth, a social security number. How can they do this? But sometimes they use what they counterfeit documents. It may be their picture on the driver's license, but it's your information on the driver's license. So when the police officer cites this person for a traffic violation or a misdemeanor violation, and they sign that citation promising to appear in court, it's not in the thief's name, it's in your name. And when you don't show up in court, the judge will issue a bench warrant, and that arrest information is then recorded in a countywide database. It's generally transferred to a state database that's generally transferred to a national database. So the ID Theft Resource Center created a great guide for victims who are criminal, who are victims of criminal identity theft. A copy of that guide should be in your Dropbox when you get ready to retrieve the information that I have available for you. I love this slide. I love this slide. I owe $23,000 on my credit card. My condo is in foreclosure and I turned 4 on Friday. Child identity theft happens when a child's or a minor's personal information is used to commit a fraud. A thief may steal the information to get a job, to get government benefits, to get medical care, to get utilities in the child's name that you can see from the slide. They can get a mortgage, they get credit cards in the child's name. The FTC lists a few tips that'll help you recognize whether or not your child is a victim of identity theft. If your child starts receiving prepaid credit offers in the mail, that could be a sign. If you file your tax return and you get a notice from the IRS saying that the Social Security number of one of your dependents has already been used, that's a sign that your child could be a victim of child identity theft. If a family is denied government benefits, because they're saying that benefits are being paid to that Social Security number to another family, that's a sign. If your child's online account has been posting spam, that's also a sign that your child account has been hacked, and that child could be a victim of identity theft. So how can you tell whether or not your child has a credit report? Well, the CFPB actually states that credit reports are not actually established at a certain age. A child could have a credit report if they're listed as an authorized user on a parent's credit card, or they are a joint holder of an account with the child, or your child is a victim of identity theft. So what can you do? Well, TransUnion has an online portal where parents and guardians can use to submit a child identity theft inquiry form to check to see if their child has a credit report. Experian has a free online one-time child security number scan. So what you do is you go to the Experian website, you put your child's information in it. If a file is found, then what Experian would do was stop the process, and they will require that you provide documentation that proof to show that you are the parent or guardian of that child. Equifax will require, if you want to check to see if your child has a file with Equifax, they will require you to submit documents by mail, like a letter explaining that you think your child may be a victim, and a copy of the child's social security number, birth certificate, and you would have to prove who you are as well. So who is most at risk for being a victim of identity theft? Everyone with a social security number is at risk for being a victim of identity theft. But there are two groups that are targeted the most, and there are children and seniors. Children are targeted because if a thief uses their social security number, it's a virgin social security number. They can start it off with a clean slate. Seniors are often targeted over the telephone and through internet phishing scams. Another group that's targeted are members of the military. In 2018, there was 10,590 reports from service members that while they were being deployed, credit card was opened up using their name. Social media users are often targets for identity theft. It's easy for cyber criminals to discover your information, your home time, all of that information that you put on social media. They grab that information and they use it to commit fraud. Another form is called ghosting. Not the ghosting with a relationship where you're dating somebody and all of a sudden they disappear. This type of ghosting is still in a dead person identity. In 2018, the FTC received 2.5 million deceased complaints about deceased identities being stolen. If you go to our website at www.consumer-org, you can find a fact sheet, and it's called Death of a Deceased Person Identity, and it lists a lot of things that you need to do if you lose a loved one in order to protect their identity. There's two other groups that I'm going to mention quickly that they don't get a lot of press, that are often victims of identity theft, and that is the homeless and individuals returning from prison. If you're working with the homeless and you're and they're in a rapid rehousing program, and you need to check their credit report, their specialty consumer reports quickly, otherwise you're never going to be able to get them housed. So what can you do to reduce your risk? Again, unfortunately, there's not much that you can do to stop identity theft, but there are ways in which you can reduce the risk. And the reason you can't stop it is because there's a lot of things that's happening that's out of your control, like a data breach. The ID Theft Resource Center report that in January, the month of January alone, 2020, there was 76 breaches that exposed 633,496 records, with 8.9% of the breach occurring in healthcare. Hello, medical identity theft. So what can you do? And there are also these phishing scams. I think it was Barbara Corcoran on the TV show The Shark. She recently reported that she lost $400,000 to a phishing scam. So what can you do to protect yourself? Protect your credit. Look at your credit report at least once a year. CSNBC put out an article the 1st of January, and in that article it stated that the number of consumers affected by the Equifax breach reached 147.9 million, making it the largest breach of personal information ever. Yet 50% of consumers, 50% have not checked their credit report. Do better passwords, secure your password, use a password manager, and protect your social security number. I talked a lot about using the fraud alert. Just quickly, there are 3 types of fraud alert. There's the initial fraud alert that will last for 1 year. After a year, it will automatically expire. There's the extended fraud alert that will last about 7 years. But in order to get that, you would have to prove that you are a victim of identity theft. And you will probably need a police report or the ID theft affidavit that's issued by the Federal Trade Commission. Um, and there's also an active duty fraud alert. So if you're working with the military and individuals that are being deployed, they need to put the military fraud alert on their credit file. The difference between the two is that um, the fraud alert can be extended for the military. Also, what you want to do is freeze your credit. Your strongest protection, the fraud alert is good, but the credit freeze is much stronger than the fraud alert, because a lot of merchants don't take the time to look to see if there's a fraud alert there or if they're going to call you. But if you have a freeze on your credit file, then your credit file is essentially on ice, and they cannot get to it to find out whether or not you are credit worthy. If you want to understand the difference between a fraud alert and a credit freeze, we have a great article on our website. All you do is just put in fraud alert and freeze into the search engine, and it will come up. You see all of the information we have on our website. That makes that $15, $25 membership look like nothing, right? So moving on to debt collection and what's on the horizon for debt collection for 2020. Last year brought about a lot of changes for credit and in the debt collection industry. For an example, the CFPB announced a notice of a proposed rule change for the Fair Debt Collection Practice Act. Digital communications are now becoming a part of the conversation for debt collection. Yep, that's right. And data privacy concerns now are front and center. For example, for those of you in California, the California Consumer Privacy Act is now the law. And according to the American Bar Association, it is the most comprehensive privacy law in the United States. Under that law, California residents now will be able to demand that companies such as Google, Facebook, data brokers, and Vox Media, they were able to demand that they disclose what information that these companies are keeping and collecting on them, and they can ask for copies of the information. For so long, if you put information on Facebook and you wanted that information deleted, they would tell you that the information didn't belong to you, it belonged to them. Now, under this new law, companies will be forced to delete consumer information upon request, and they can opt out of having them publish their information about them or about their children or selling their information. In your Dropbox, be on the lookout for an article published by The Guardian, and it will explain the new law if you're interested. Second, the wait for the final rules for debt collection by the CFPB is over. Those rules are set to be released soon, likely in May. And no one knows what the new rules are going to look like, because there was a lot of debate going back and forward. Advocates were claiming that the rules didn't go far enough to protect consumers, and then you had the industry up in arm pushing for the CFPB to publish the rules as proposed. So we don't know what they're going to look like, but I recently ran across an article that was created by Inside Arms, which caters to the debt collection industry. And in the article, the general counsel made a couple of predictions. And what she predicted is that debt collectors will have ground rules for communicating with consumers through digital channels. Let me translate that to you. In other words, the new rules will be as they were proposed, that they will allow debt collectors to contact consumers by text messaging, email, direct messaging on social media without your permission. Another prediction made in the article is that call caps will likely be a thing in 2020. Translation: debt collectors will likely be able to call you 7 times per week per debt, meaning a consumer with 8 medical debts could receive 56 calls a week. Yeah, 56 calls. In addition, if the rules are implemented as they were proposed, debt collectors will be able to sue you without confirming that you are the right person who owed the debt. So if you have a common name like Linda Williams, you can spend most of the year in court defending yourself on the debt that you don't know anything about. And also, Debt collectors will be allowed to collect zombie debt. And zombie debt is so old that they can't even file a lawsuit against you for the debt. So let's take a look at the debt collection process. And again, my focus for this segment is going to be on the federal law. So when an account becomes seriously past due, the creditor may decide to turn it over to their own internal collection department for collection, or the debt collector may decide to enter into a contract with a debt collection agency and just assign the debt over to the agency to collect it on their behalf. Or the creditor may just throw their hands in the air and say, and write the debt off as a loss and outright sell the debt. Now, the federal law that regulates debt collection in the United States is called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Now, under that law, there is no requirement that the agency, that the creditor give you any type of notice that they have sold or assigned your debt. So if you're looking for that type of protection, you may want to look to your state law, because generally the state law either gives you more rights, or it either give you more rights or a little bit more than what the federal law is giving you. For an example, in Florida, there's a state law that provides that the assignee must give the debtor written notice that the debt has been assigned to them, and that notice must be given as soon as possible, or at least 30 days before they start any type of collection activity. Now, if the debt is assigned to a third party for collection, the original creditor is going to continue to own the debt. They just contracted with the collection agency to collect it for them. And if this debt is assigned, the collection agency is going to take all of the accused from the creditor, meaning that they can't sue you without the creditor's authorization. And if the original creditor insists that the agency collect 100% of the debt, 100% of the debt, then otherwise the creditor will not be able to negotiate with you. So what type of debts are covered under the Act? So the FDCPA, the Federal Debts Collection Practice Act, only cover consumer debts. So consumer debts are generally ones that are personal in nature. They pertain to transaction entered into between an individual and a merchant. The most common types are credit card, medical, student loans, cell phone bills, utility bills, bank overdraft, car loans, and those dreaded payday loans. They are primarily for personal, family, or household purposes. Now, non-transactional debts, such as a fine, a traffic ticket, or other municipal fines, are not covered under the Federal Debt Collection Practice Act. And as of July the 1st, 2007, these debts cannot be reported on your credit report. The only debts that can be reported on your credit report are debts that you entered into willingly with a contract. I don't know about you, but when the officer give me a ticket and I sign that ticket, I'm not willingly entering into no contract with him. So so the next thing you want to look at is what type of individuals are considered debt collectors under the law. The Federal Debt Collection Practice Act protects consumers only against third-party debt collectors. It does not apply to the original creditor or its employees. So for an example, if you have an account with Macy's and your bill was due on the 5th of the month, on the 10th of the month, you started getting phone calls from Macy's trying to find out why you're a little behind in paying your debt. That individual, that employee working for Macy's will not be subject to the Federal Debt Collection Practice Act. But there are a couple of exceptions. Now, if this person from Macy's called you and when trying to collect that debt, they used a different name, or they implied that they were a third party attempting to collect the debt, well, in that instance, they would have to qualify. They will have to comply with the Federal Debt Collection Practice Act. So the most common type of debt collector that falls under the Act are debt collection agencies and collection attorneys. One of the things you need to know is business debts. do not fall under the Federal Debt Collection Practice Act. So if you're operating a local barbecue joint and you created debt because of that business that you are operating, those calls that you get from the debt collector, they will not have to comply with the federal law. Government employees, when collecting your debts in their official capacity, like the IRS, DMV, if you wrote a check to DMV and that check bounced, they're trying to collect that debt, they are not subject to the Fair Debt Collection Practice Act. Another exception to the act is what you call the Debt Collection Improvement Act of 1966. It applies when the government, the federal government is collecting debts owed to them, and the collection actions are by the U.S. Treasury. Some example will be a student direct, a guarantee loan, or a Small Business Administration, SBA loan. So if your house was damaged by a recent flood and FEMA came in and say, I can give you this SBA loan, and you take the loan and you use it to fix up your house, well, individuals that will be contacting you to collect that debt will not fall under the Fair Debt Collection and Practice Act. Okay, I have another question for you. And this is a true and false question. Under the Fair Debt Collection Practice Act, a debt collector attempting to collect a debt from you cannot contact you by postcard. Is that true or false? Under the Fair Debt Collection Practice Act, the FDCPA, a debt collector attempting to collect a debt from you cannot contact you by postcard. Is that true or is that false? Well, let's turn to what debt collectors can and cannot do. The FDCPA, the federal law, prescribes what third-party debt collectors must do, can do, and cannot do. And one of the things that they cannot do, that is invade your privacy. Section 804 of the Act specifically states that a debt collector cannot contact you by postcard, and when communicating with any person other than you, he cannot state that you owe a debt. He cannot use any type of language or symbols on any correspondence going to you to indicate that you owe a debt. So in other words, he can't put any deadbeat emojis on the envelope that's going to you. Debt collectors cannot use abusive collection tactics or language when they are trying to contact you. That's often is a sign when you deal with a debt collector and they're using abusive language, 9 times out of 10, it is a debt collection scam. It is a debt collection scam. The FDA also regulates when debt collectors can call you, where they can call you. If you don't want them calling you at work, you tell them, look, don't call me at work. If you want to deal with me, do it in writing. Put everything in writing, and they must honor that request. So what do you do what should you do when a debt collector calls? What are your rights? As I stated before, if you fall behind on an account, that account is probably going to be assigned to a third-party debt collector. And this newly assigned debt collector is going to call you on the mail. They're going to ring your phone and say, hello, this is Ace Debt Collection Company. I'm calling to collect the debt. Now, this is when you get that call. This is when those powerful rights that you have under the FDCPA kicks in. Under the law, you have a right to dispute. Your right to dispute a debt has 3 separate components. A lot of times you may read a document and it may appear as if it's only one right, but your right to dispute a debt has 3 separate components. You have the right to notice, you have the right to dispute the debt, and you have the right to written verification of the debt. But there are time limits on some of these rights. Your right to notice of the debt. Your right to notice of the debt states when you get that phone call from the debt collector. The federal law states that within 5 days after the initial communication with you, the debt collector shall send you written notice of the debt, and in that notice, it must contain 5 things: the amount of the debt, including all interest, any late fees, any attorney fees, and other charges, the name of the creditor to whom you owe the debt, a statement that unless you dispute the debt in 30 days. After receipt of the notice, the debt will assume to be valid. Let me say that again. If you don't dispute the debt within 30 days, not 40 days, not 50 days, but 30 days after receipt of the notice, the debt will be assumed to be valid, meaning that that debt collector after that 30 days is going to continue with its collection activities. A statement that if you notify the debt collector in writing, not over the phone, but in writing, that within the 30-day period that you are disputing the debt collector will need to stop the collection activities and mail you verification of the debt. A statement that in response to your written request, the debt collector will provide you with the name and the address of the original creditor. Now, if the debt collector does not send you this validation notice within 5 days, but continue to pursue you for the debt, then they have violated the federal law. Okay, let's go to your right to dispute. Within 30 days after receiving that notice of debt, let me back up. After that initial phone call, within 5 days, you're going to get the notice of debt. And the notice of debt must contain the 5 things I just discussed. Okay, so now you have the right to dispute the debt. So within 30 days of receiving this notice of debt, you need to exercise your right under the validation process by sending a letter disputing the debt and requesting the name and the contact information of the original creditor. You can dispute all of the debt, or you can dispute part of the debt. Now, if you are asserting that this is not your debt, that this is a mistaken identity or identity theft, then what you need to put in that request, and in addition to asking for the name of the original creditor, you want to ask for copies of the signed contract or any note that was signed by this person to open up the account. If the creditor collected ID at the time the account was open, you want a copy of the ID. Anything that was used to obtain the credit. Why? Because you want to look at the note and say, hey, this is not my signature. This is identity theft. This is not my signature. If you believe the amount is incorrect, then you need to ask for copies of payments. You want a history, you want an accounting, you want a history of this debt. When it was open, how much was paid on it. You want credit, you want interest, and you want fees, everything that was paid on that account. Now, everything that was paid on that account. So what is the validation process? The validation process is when the debt collector sends you information, enough information that will allow you to verify that that is not your debt. Enough information to verify, at a minimum, the name of the amount of the debt and the name of the creditor. But again, if you are claiming that this is not your debt, that you're a victim of identity theft, then you want enough information to determine that it's not your debt. You want a copy of the contract, a copy of the note, copy of ID, anything that was anything that will help you identify that that is not your account. Now, can you dispute a debt over the phone during the first contact? Yeah, you can. But remember what I said about the 5 things? If you don't dispute it within writing within 30 days, the debt collector would assume that the debt is valid. So within 30 days of receiving a notice of debt, you must exercise your right by sending a letter in writing. Send it by certified mail. If you're not an organized person, it's time to get organized and create a file and keep all of the documentation. A couple more things and I'll open it up to questions. Debt collection scams. What is a debt collection scam? The FTC received 2.7 million complaints a year about scam. And what topped the list? Debt collection scams. Debt collecting and telemarketing scams are incredible persistent. Why? Because they work. Debt collectors can sound scary over the phone, and sometimes they can catch consumers at the right time, and they can quickly trick them into paying up before they even realize what has happened. I deal with clients that do this all the time. So the scam is pretty straightforward. The scammers will call the consumer to collect the debt. They are posing as a real collection agency. Often the scammer has access to your personal information through identity theft, through a data breach, from obtaining your credit report. And one of the things you need to make your clients aware of is that online payday loan lead generators are known for collecting personal information on individuals seeking payday loan, whether they get the loan or not, and they take that information and they sell it. They sell it to these scammers. So for an example, the scammer may have pulled your credit report or pulled some information on you, and they know you have an account with American Express, and they know you're behind on that account. So they'll call you up and they'll tell you that they are collecting for American Express. And they'll get you to pull out the money in your wallet and go ahead and pay them for American Express. But you're not dealing with American Express. You're dealing with a scammer. Another type of scam that's really, really, really scary is phantom debt. And the reason this one is scary is because phantom debt is debt that has been fabricated. It's not real debt. And it's treated as if it's real debt. And debt collectors are trying to collect it from the consumers. Here is how the scam works. Debt brokers are in the business. They buy and they sell debt all the time. However, in some cases, what the FTC has found is that they are creating or counterfeiting debt from misappropriated information from you. When you go online to try and get a payday loan, they're taking this information and they're creating phony debt. And then they turn around and they sell this debt to another debt collection agency. And then this agency is coming after you to collect the debt. And the problem is when the consumer get ready to use the verification process to verify the debt, then the collection agency is going to go back to the debt broker who create the debt. And what do you think they're going to do? They're going, yeah, the debt is real. They're going to go ahead and verify the debt. And so then the consumer is caught in the crosshairs of the debt collection agency, and some are being taken to court and being sued on this fictitious debt. So what can you do? World Privacy Forum recommend that if you receive a communication from a debt collector request all of the documentation that you can. Go through the verification process anyway. Tell them you want copies of, if it's a loan, you want copies of the contract, you want copies of the note, you want copies of the ID that was used, you want all of that information. And then you get on the phone and you start filing complaints right away with the Better Business Bureau, with the FTC, with the CFPB. You start screaming loud until you can get this out of the way. Go to your Attorney General's website. See what they have on their website about dealing with phantom debt. So why should you dispute a debt? You want to dispute a debt because it's identity theft or it's because of mistaken identity. You want to dispute a debt if the amount is incorrect or it's a inflated amount. You want to dispute the debt if it has already been paid or you settle with a debt collection agency for that debt. You also want to do it if it's too old or if it's time barred. And if one of the things you need to learn is you need to learn what debt collectors can do and what they cannot do. And once you have that information, when one call you and they violate the federal law, you will know it. So then you can file your complaints. You can file a complaint with the company itself. You can, if it's a debt collection company, call them up, file a complaint with them, ask to speak to the supervisor. I mean, not doing it good, but do it anyway, document it. So when you go to the CFPB to file a complaint, they're going to ask you, have you talked to anyone at the company? You can say, yes, I talked to the general manager on this day, and he said this. You want to, they says file a complaint with the FTC, but generally they will send you back to the CFPB, follow with the Better Business Bureau, and follow with the state attorney general's office. Know your rights when you're dealing with debt collection. And another thing, the census information is coming up. We want individuals to participate in the census, but we want them to protect your information. If someone come to your door to count you, check their ID. check their ID, check their credentials. If you don't think that they are who they say they are, call your local census office to make sure you know who you're dealing with. The census is not going to ask you for the information via email about your social security number or other personal information. Resources, Consumer Action, Identity Theft Resource Center, Privacy Rights Clearinghouse is great. AARP has a lot of articles on debt collection and scam. And don't forget your Attorney General's website. And find out from your state Attorney General what protections are available for you if you're a victim of identity theft or of a debt collection scam. If you would like to contribute to Consumer Action, here the address where you contribute. And now we will take questions. Allegra, do you have any questions on Twitter?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yes, we do have a question. Thank you, Linda. That was so informative. Lots of good information in there. We have a question from Twitter asking, my father passed away last year and recently received an offer for a credit card from Capital One. How can I check to see if his identity was stolen? And if it was stolen, since I was his caregiver and daughter, will I be responsible for any debt?
Well, first of all, you are not responsible for the debt of your deceased relatives. The state of the deceased person who owes the debt, if there's not enough money in the estate, then the debt would typically not be paid. The only time you may be responsible for the debt of a deceased relative is if you co-signed on that obligation. Now, if you had joint credit with your father and you co-signed on a car or anything with him, then yeah, you could be responsible for that. If you live in a community property state, and you're married to the person, you could be responsible for the debt. Generally, again, the estate of the deceased person will owe the debt, not you. Now, if you want to know how to check your person's credit report, again, on our website at www.consumer-action.org is a fact sheet on death of a deceased person's identity. When a person passes away, generally it is the mortuary who's responsible of sending information to the Social Security Administration to let them know that this person has passed away. But a lot of times that won't happen. So what I would suggest that you do is that you get a copy of the death certificate, you send it to the Social Security Administration with a letter asking them to mark that Social Security number, that file, as deceased. You send it to the credit reporting agencies and you let them know that your father has passed away, and tell them to put on that, just like a fraud alert, an alert on the file that the person is deceased. You wait a couple of months and then you go online to see if you can pull a credit file to see if these actions have taken place. Again, on our website, it's a great fact sheet of all of the steps that you need to take when a deceased person identity has been, when you think a deceased person's identity has been stolen, and how to protect yourself. Generally, the state is not responsible.
Linda, I can put that resource sheet on Twitter. I'm happy to do that. And then I don't know if you want to include it also in the Dropbox. That might be a good idea.
Yes, I will.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, we have a few more questions. What are the signs that your child's identity has been stolen, and what do you do if it is? Are there pros and cons of freezing their credit?
No. In fact, if you think here's the thing about freezing. First of all, if you think your child's identity has been stolen, some of the signs are they may get a pre-approved credit offer in the mail, or they may get letters from a debt collector coming in the mail. If you try to file the tax return and IRS is saying that the Social Security number is already being used for another return, that's also a sign. The credit freeze is free, and you can put a credit freeze on your file, and you can put a credit freeze on your child's file. I would say go to the credit reporting agencies. That information would be in your Dropbox of how to use it. Have them check to see if your child has a credit report. If your child has a credit report, and you want to work with that credit reporting agency to get that file taken off, you want to put a fraud alert on that says that this child is a minor, or you want to freeze that child's credit report. When that child turns 16, if they have a credit file in it, when that child turns 16, you want to go through this process all over again, because it will take a while to clear it up. And when that child turns 18, you don't want their future to be ruined with credit that they didn't open up in their names.
Thanks, Linda. Yep, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Allegra. Do you still have a question from Twitter?
You go first, because I see a few coming in on Zoom.
Yes, I saw two questions from the Zoom chat. First question is from David Casas. When you respond to a collection letter, what information should we provide in the letter?
Again, when you respond to a collection letter, it depends on your situation. If you are saying that that the debt is a result of identity theft, in addition to asking for the name of the original creditor and their contact information for the original creditor, again, you're going to ask for the contract. You're going to ask for any ID that was used to open up that name. If you go to the CFPB's website, they have sample letters that you can use to dispute a debt. But if you're saying it was identity theft, you want to make sure that you put in that letter that you want a copy of the note, the contract, any ID that was used to open up an account. If you go to open up an account, they're gonna have you fill out an application. They're gonna take copies of your driver's license, other ID, and your reference number. You want all of that information. You want enough information so that you can decide whether or not that is your debt. If it's your debt, but you're disputing the amount of that particular debt, then you want an accounting of that bill, all of the payments that were made, all of the credits that were made on that account. That's what you want. So it depends on what it is that you need. You may just want to ask for the original creditor and that address because you just don't recognize the debt.
Okay, thank you, Linda. And the next question is, what is the frame time when a collection is removed from the credit report?
A collection?
Yes.
A collection,
what is the frame time when a collection is removed from the credit report?
Collection, if I'm not mistaken, a collection item can stay on your report for I think for about 7 years, right? I think about 7 years. Don't quote me on that. Send me an email and send me an email at linda.williams@consumer-action.org and I will get you that information. I am doing a training on credit reports and specialty consumer reports, and I will have that information for you. So on April 29th, so look out for the invite to join. But collection accounts stay on your record, I think, for about 7 years. But the older they get, the less impact that they have.
Okay, I think that's all the question from the Zoom. I hand it over to Allegra if there is still more question from the Twitter.
Well, I'll be
Linda,
I'll be on Twitter
okay.
for the next 30 minutes, and I will answer that question if you're on Twitter. I have at my fingertips.
Okay. And Linda, lastly, we have one more question. Will a census person ask for a social security number if they come to your door, even a real legitimate one?
No. From all of the
Okay.
from all of the information that because I've been researching it, they will not.
Great, thank you.
Okay, if there's
Linda?
Yes.
This one question came in. After the account had moved from your credit report, Can a collection account could garnish your funds after 7 years?
Garnishment of wages is going to be dependent upon your state law. That's going to be dependent upon your state law. So I'm not sure what state you're in, but I would strongly suggest that you go to the website of your attorney general to find out your rights and to find out about wage garnishment. That's going to depend on your state and your state law. Or if you have a Department of Consumer Affairs or a legal aid in your area, those are resources that you would probably like to go to, because there are certain things that you can do. For an example, in California, if my wages are garnished, I may be able to file an exemption to keep them from taking all of my money. So it's going to depend on your state law. I would strongly suggest, I'm not an attorney, but I would strongly suggest that you contact the local legal aid in your area to find out what are your rights, how you can protect your salary, and when they can garnish your wages.
Okay, and then there is one more question, and if you have any more questions, maybe you can join in the Twitter, or is it okay to email you, Linda?
You can email me and I will answer all of your questions. And if you tell me what state you're in as well.
Okay, they have Social Security number, but they have tax ID. Can they be a victim of identity theft?
Yeah, they can steal that identity. They can steal that ID number. Yeah, anyone can be a victim of identity theft. But the main anchor to you is that Social Security number. But anyone can be a victim of identity theft.
I had a question about the difference between a fraud alert and a credit freeze. Can you briefly explain what's what?
Okay. Yes. Fraud alert is basically a notice that's put on your credit file. It tells creditors when they go to pull your credit file to find out if you're credit worthy that you may be a victim of identity theft. And then a notation on your file is supposed to be a notice for them to take further action, to do their due diligence and make sure that they are dealing with you and not someone who has stolen your identity. The fraud alert is good protection, but it's not your strongest protection. Your strongest protection is a credit freeze. And the reason the freeze is the strongest is because if I go to Sears and I try and buy their red washer and dryer that I've been lusting over for a year, and I fill out the credit application, Sears cannot look at my credit file to see if I have good credit or bad credit because they can't get in to see my file. My file is frozen, it's on ice. With the fraud alert, they can see your credit file, and some businesses will bypass that fraud alert and go ahead and issue the credit. With the freeze, they can't get to it. They cannot see it at all. The freeze is free, the fraud alert is free. And if you check your web box, I will put in an article that was created by consumeraction that gives you, that you can put in your files to give you a detailed explanation of the difference between the two.
Great. I did put that up on Twitter. Also have a question about checking your credit score. Is that the same thing as checking your credit report? Wouldn't your score be impacted if there was fraudulent account on your credit report?
Yes. Your credit score, checking your credit report and checking your credit score are actually two different things. Some like Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, they have it where you can purchase from them your credit score that will go with your credit report, but it's going to be a little different from your FICO score. If you notice, that is a great red flag. If you notice a drop in your credit score, you should be looking at your credit report to find out if there's any fraudulent activity on your credit report. So good question. Yes. You notice a drop?
Yeah.
That's your red flag to go and look at your credit report.
And this is talking about it's easily accessible on your online banking sometimes to see your report or to see your score every time you log into your bank account. So that might be something for people to just look at. And the last question, it was about, I'm a victim of the Equifax data breach, is it worth signing up for their ID theft prevention as part of the settlement,
Yes.
even though they were the company that had the breach to begin with?
Anytime, my recommendation is anytime you receive a letter in the mail that says, I am sorry, but your information was caught up in the breach, but one of the ways we're going to make up for you, we're going to give you credit monitoring service for a year, take them up on that. Because if your social security number was involved in that breach, you have a 99.9% chance of becoming a victim of identity theft. Take them up on it. Yeah, and I think Equifax were offering money as well as the credit monitoring report, and I think Consumer Action came out on the side was take the credit monitoring service. It would be more worth it.
Well, I think the money was about 14 cents a victim at this point. So yeah, probably worth a little bit more. That was it.
Okay. Well, Nani, did you have any questions? Please stay with us a little longer. I want to show you empowerment and action. Please join us on Twitter if you have any additional questions. Our handle is at Consumer Action. Use hashtag CAID Theft and CA Webinar. But I have one last thing.
So, gentlemen, we're dealing with a real tricky customer, a real troublemaker. She owes the bank $2,000. It's our job to make sure she pays up. Today, her name is Angela Reynolds. She's a 74-year-old widow and she lives alone with her little pooch, Gilbert. Real cute, huh? She hasn't responded to any letters or my many phone calls at 6 a.m. on a Sunday. She retired 2 years ago, so we can't contact her boss. But hey, guess what? I found her on Facebook, and I wrote to every single one of her friends.
It's dedication.
Let's get tough with this one. Get the cash. Threaten legal action. Jail. Tell her you're the police.
I don't know. Can we even do that, boss?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we can't do any of that.
Who's gonna stop us? Get out of here!
We know you're in there, Angela Reynolds. Let's go, open up.
You owe the bank $2,000 and we've come to collect. Open up, Angela. You know you're in there. I think I saw something move. Stop wasting our time.
I know my rights, and I demand that any further communication I have with you is in writing only. I want written confirmation about who I owe money to and how much. I'm entitled to that by law. So get off my property now!